Hi, I'm Hannah Velasquez. I'm the assistant sports editor here at the Paisano,
And I'm Montufar Soria. I'm the opinion editor of the Paisano.
and this is Roadrunner Racing. So we are talking about the Australian Grand Prix from this weekend. We're going to be talking about qualifying first. Let's get the most obvious thing out of the way: the McLaren lockout of the front row of the grid.
Yeah, I think the free practices on Friday and early Saturday, I think that really got people excited that there was going to be more competition for the front, but instead, there kind of was, but then McLaren just came in and dominated immediately, and P3, which was Max Verstappen, he was too far behind.
Yeah, I feel like that's going to be a trend that we're going to be seeing a lot during, I guess, like the whole season is McLaren's going to be dominating in qualifying. Also, Ferrari did pretty good in qualifying. Not so great in the race, but for qualifying, they were pretty decent.
Yeah, I think they were pretty decent. I know there was kind of some disappointments, especially because Lewis was P8, I think. But I think P10 qualifying on his first race on a Ferrari is pretty okay. But, I'm used to, my favorite driver is Checo Perez, and qualifying is not his forte. So to me, anything that makes it to Q3, I'm like, this is good.
This is fantastic. And then we also got our first look at Haas. Not doing as great as they were last season. It seems like kind of just a little bit of a downgrade.
They're reminding me of Alpine at the beginning of last season.
Yeah.
And just, or Alpine, or just Haas in 2023. They were that slow. And then we saw that change 2024. They were up there. Hulkenberg and even Kevin sometimes, he got it into the top 10 at some point. But they weren't even, it was not good. No. And of course, Ollie couldn't run at all.
Yeah.
Bad luck. But yeah, I was expecting more from Esteban, but no, he was at the very back of the pack.
Yeah, it was honestly really kind of sad, kind of disappointing to watch. Yeah. Kind of just made me feel bad for them.
Yeah.
But going into the race, again, Haas didn't do too great. They finished at the back of the grid.
But they finished.
But they finished.
And not everybody can say that.
Right.
They
so the Australian race claimed 6 victims this time, starting with, not in any particular order, but Liam Lawson, Gabriel Borletto, Fernando Alonso, Carlos Sainz, Jack Doan, and Isaac Hadjar.
Yeah, that was pretty rough. Doohan was the first to go in the formation lap, and that was pretty sad to watch.
Hadjar was the first to go.
Oh, yeah. Hadjar was the first to go.
The formation lap.
Yeah.
That sucked.
That was really sad. He slipped. The track was wet. He went out. He stepped into a white line and went out. Yeah, that was very disappointing. And that delayed the race for, I think, a good 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think it was 15 minutes. And then got started. A few laps in. Lap 2, Carlos Sainz.
Yeah. I think Carlos was lap 1, I think. Almost immediately. Yeah. Well, went off. What was the thing? Did he say he had like a surge or something?
Yeah, I think it was a mechanical failure, which I feel like might be even worse than making your own mistake during the race, because then it's like, oh, it's not my fault that I couldn't finish.
Yeah, but he kind of redeemed himself for the team or at least the team was really talking up his strategy behind the scenes, kind of to make him look better. But I mean, he's always been known in Ferrari as like good at making up strategies for himself.
Yeah.
So I think that's good that he was still able to contribute.
Yeah, and I mean, they did pretty decently in qualifying, and so, I mean, Williams just in general kind of looks better than they did last season. Alex Albon finished 5th.
5th, yeah.
5th in the race, which very high for Williams.
Yeah, for
very exciting.
Because last year it took quite a few tries to get points in a race.
Yeah,
so it's very exciting.
But I think for Williams, I think this race really showcased what we're going to be seeing for them this season. I think they're going to be a pretty good midfield team.
Yeah, I think they'll be right up there fighting. They might even bother Aston Martin a little bit. They probably will, because Aston Martin they were looking fine. I mean, it's too early to tell, I think. Alonso did crash, and they didn't qualify super well, but, we might see improvements there. I know after qualifying, Alonso said that he was happy with the car. So that's great. We'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah, honestly. Kind of the same thing with Lewis and Ferrari. He seemed very hopeful after qualifying, it looked like.
Yeah.
And then the race happened.
The race.
And Ferrari, classic Ferrari.
Ferrari was Ferrari. They had to Ferrari it up.
Must be the water.
Terrible strategy. It's just kind of how it was. But, you know, Hamilton did lead the lap. So good for him. Finished within the points with 1 point, which at the beginning of the weekend, he said he was expecting to finish in the top 10. And he finished 10th.
Yeah.
So not so bad. He didn't crash, which was great. And I think the biggest thing that made headlines apart from the bad strategy was the whole situation with his new engineer, Ricky Adami, who was engineer for Carlos Sainz and Sebastian Vettel before. Lewis is still getting used to that new engineer, and the engineer is getting used to him. But I saw a funny thing. There was a Lewis fan that went back and listened to the first races between Lewis and Bono, and it was kind of the same thing. Okay. So, I mean, hopefully it doesn't take 10 years to get comfortable, but it's how it has to go.
Yeah, I honestly have hopes that Ferrari is going to get better with the season. They're going to get used to the car. I have hopes that they'll figure out their tire strategies better because, you know, Lewis's engineer and Charles's engineer were both saying two different things about the rain before it started pouring down kind of towards the end of the race. Before that, it was kind of getting a little boring. I thought I was going to fall asleep at one point. And then it's like everything happened at once.
Everything happened all at once. Lots of crashes. Right about around lap 40, I think, is when stuff began getting kind of intense. And we lost 4 cars very quickly. But yeah, honestly, I think the only team who had some idea of the rain, and I think they still kind of messed it up, was McLaren. I know Lando at least was getting very clear information, but he got it called into the pits too late. Which brings us to McLaren.
In general.
Yeah. So Lando won from pole. He kept pretty much control of the race for the whole time, which he should with the car that he has. It was Piastri who lost the position to Max P2 in the first lap, I think.
Yeah. And then I thought he gained it back for a little bit.
Yeah, he did gain it lap 20 or so, something like that. Very relatively quickly.
Yeah, and then both McLarens ended up going off into the gravel at one point, slipping on just the track in general. And then Oscar slid into the grass and got stuck there. But he was able to recover pretty quickly from that. I think because there were some videos from the stands of like recording him like the entire time and like just how hard he was trying to get that car out of the grass. I think really just shows his like determination to like finish these races and do well, but also because it was in front of his home crowd. But even though he was kind of in the back of the grid, he did work his way up to P9, which was incredibly impressive, I think.
Yeah, I think so for sure. I mean, the timetables marked him as out of the race, and he still made it back, and everybody was cheering, and you could see that on the stream. So I think that's pretty cool. And it's a good thing that he got stuck in grass and not in gravel, or else he really would have been out. But yeah, that definitely put him on the back burner. But he managed to recover because he's a very good driver and also because the car is very good.
Oh, yeah.
And he came back ahead of Ollie, who was P14, I think, by the time everybody, because only 14 cars finished the race. He quickly passed Esteban. I don't even remember who else was in there. Yuki, we can talk about Yuki later.
Yeah. He overtook Lewis.
He overtook Lewis in the last lap.
Impressive.
Yeah, and he took his end plate with him. But that's fine. Hey, he got 2 points on his home race, and he was pretty disappointed. But honestly, I think McLaren was a bit to blame for that because they left them with those tires for too long.
Oh, yeah. And I think that brings us to even earlier in the race, tire rules.
The tire rules.
Just McLaren kind of being a little bit all over the place when it still comes to that. You know, they were like, hey, like, keep your places. And then after that, they were like, you can race.
Yeah, and it was only 3 laps, so they had it, closed. It was, I think, on lap 30 that they told him, keep it like this. Yeah. And then lap 33, they were like, okay, you can race, but Alonso crashed that lap, so there was no racing at all. And I think it's ridiculous because Oscar lost like 2.5 seconds to Lando in that time. And there really was no reason. I don't think he would have done anything silly or stupid to try and overtake him and risk the thing. Because it was difficult to overtake for the whole race because the track was wet. But it's just, to me, it felt like you're getting too close to Lando. Lando might make a mistake if he gets spooked.
Right.
and we don't want to risk that.
Which has happened before.
Yeah, it's what has happened
multiple times before. But I really think McLaren needs to figure themselves out when it comes to these rules, because like they just extended Oscar's contract. I think they really need to figure out who they're going to prioritize as drivers, because they can't prioritize both for the championship.
Yeah, and I think if they're going to prioritize it, they need to give them at least to the middle of the year, to the summer break, to see who's ahead.
Yeah.
How are things looking? And then prioritize somebody, not just kind of like start the first race. And I know obviously Lando did qualify ahead, and maybe that would give him priority for pit stops and stuff like that, but not to stop the racing altogether. And I think that's an insult to the McLaren legacy.
Oh yeah, frankly. Like just the history of like McLaren altogether, and like having like great number 1 and number 2 drivers, like.
Yeah, that they're allowed to fight each other, and you know, sometimes that causes the team, and sometimes they become world champions with it. It's what they're made of. So I think holding back any of the drivers is not a good idea for McLaren.
Yeah, but I mean, other than that, Max was really good during the entire race. Those last few laps were truly nail biters. I was like, oh my god, Max is gonna pass Lando. I was super excited about that, but. Came up short,
yeah. I think in that he was very limited by the car. I think the Red Bull just does not go as quick as a McLaren. And also the track. He could not risk anything with any big, bold overtakes because he would have slipped off.
Yeah. And then, too, I think he came into the pits to change his tires too late when it started raining. When he came into the pits, he was kind of sliding all over the place. I think Red Bull should have pulled him in a little bit sooner.
Yeah, and he only went in when he said he wanted to, because Red Bull was not going to put him in.
And then obviously Hamilton stayed out for a lap on those tires.
It was not good.
Yeah, I think Ferrari should have called him in sooner as well.
Yeah, for sure. Both of them. They were both left out too late, and that's why they ended up at the back of the pack.
Yeah.
There was just a lot of confusion. I don't know if all the pit walls were not doing a great job with those box calls.
Yeah.
Including Yuki's pit wall. Yep. Obviously, with Hadjar out of the race at the beginning, Yuki was the only Visa Cash-Up RB in the race. And he had qualified P5, so he had done his job.
Oh, yeah.
He was in the top 10 for most of the race. And then at the end, with all the confusion, I didn't even know what lap they called him in. Yeah. But it was the wrong one, because he finished P12.
Yeah.
That was just sad.
So, is incredibly disappointing, because like as we've seen from like last season, again, like he did really well, and coming into this season, I think it was expected of him to do even better, especially with Lawson as a teammate.
Yeah, so it's just, I think B Corp had the opportunity to grab points and they completely messed it up.
Yeah.
Red Bull did get points all on Max's shoulders, because Lawson didn't do anything the entire weekend. Some of it was technical, obviously, and obviously we know how that garage works. They don't do anything for the driver. He was out in Q1. He qualified pretty late. He left the pits. He came out of the race from the pit lane, and then he crashed pretty late in the race. But he was not even in the top 10. He was.
Yeah.
I think he got into the top 10 when like 4 cars crashed, and then he crashed, so he didn't even finish in the top 10.
Yeah.
R.I.P.
I mean, by that point, like the entire grid was like kind of bunched up, and that's kind of when he got himself a little bit up there.
Yeah.
But I mean, other than that, let's talk about some race drama. Let's talk about Helmut Marko's comments from before the race.
Before the race? What did he say before the race?
He made some comments being like,
about Gabriel?
Yeah, about Gabriel.
Oh, yeah, he was a big hater the entire weekend. He talked badly about Gabriel Bortoleto, who's from Brazil. He also talked badly about Yuki.
Yeah.
He also talked badly about another Red Bull Junior, who's also from Japan. It was a Yumi. Just general uncomfortable racist comments.
Yeah, and then after the race, he had some interesting comments about Hadjar, and what had happened. I think it was a really bad take, quite honestly.
Yeah, and I think it was overly reported on.
Right.
There was no reason to spread that around.
For sure. Which, like, I feel like that's most of his comments, though.
Yeah, true enough. It makes good headlines. But basically, Hadjar, after he crashed in the formation lap, he was basically crying on the cameras chased him all over the paddock to show him crying. And then Helmut Marko said that was embarrassing. Helmut Marko, for those of you who don't know, is the advisor to Red Bull, the whole organization, and also just a general hater of everything that is good in the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah. He made those comments about Hajar, which were really contrasted by the fact that Hajar, who's a big Lewis Hamilton fan, was also publicly comforted by Lewis's dad, Anthony, who's a great dude.
I feel like for a lot of these drivers, especially these rookies, like they're really young, like they're still kids technically, and there's so much pressure coming into these like first races. Like it's a lot, it's kind of expected that they would be very emotional kind of over things like this, or like even getting points or like winning races. Like it's a lot.
Yeah, and he's not the first person to cry. Honestly, I think Ollie also cried when he crashed in one of the practices. Drivers cry all the time when they win something. It's just, I think it's normal.
Yeah, normal human reaction.
Yeah. But the thing is, he had to say something because he couldn't say anything about the crash because his favorite, Liam Lawson, also crashed.
Yeah.
So there was really nothing he could say on that matter.
And then in the cool down room, both Lando and George, I think it was funny and kind of worth bringing up. Both of them ended up cursing in the cool down room.
Yeah.
And I think it was so funny, like seeing their faces drop and kind of like look around for the cameras to see if they caught that. Because if you don't know, drivers aren't allowed to swear anymore, or they'll get like
they'll get a fine, a lot of fines. It's very unclear, and nobody's happy about it. But they can still swear on the radio, because Max sweared, and so did Lewis by accident. But I guess the cool down room, nothing happened, nothing came out of it.
I know,
even though they both did it, they both noticed it, but I guess the FIA was like, "We let it slide."
Yeah, and then after, in the post-race interviews, I think an interviewer asked George and Max, like, have you guys squashed your beef yet, or are you guys still, like, upset with each other? Even though it's been, like, so long.
It's been, like, so long, but George was talking about it in testing or something. It really seems, the thing is, when they're asked about it, because that's what fans say, well, if you don't want him to talk about it, don't ask him. But, like, when he's asked, George goes on this whole crusade about how he's fighting the good fight against Max. And meanwhile, Max is like, I don't care. Have you seen my cat? So, yeah, they were asked, and it was Max who answered in a joking manner. He was like, oh, it's still really bad. Well, whatever. Yeah. Honestly, I think
it's been drawn out.
It's been drawn out. They didn't even interact on track. They started next to each other. There was no interaction. The Mercedes was 6 seconds behind. I mean, it was a joke. So, yeah, I mean, I'm all for fighting, beefing, but if you're not doing it on track, don't bother doing it off track.
Right. But anyways, let's talk about next race. What are your predictions?
The China GP, which is next Sunday. And for those of us in Texas, or just like the Americas, it's at 2 a.m. There's a sprint race. I want chaos. I know it rained last year.
Yeah.
Hopefully it rains again.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe the drivers deserve a chance to figure out the cars without rain.
But it's like a sprint race too.
Yeah.
And sprint races have kind of either been like hit or misses.
Yeah, either they're the most boring thing in the world, or I think last China sprint, it were like 3 safety cars back to back.
Oh yeah. It's pretty interesting, I'd say.
Pretty interesting. I think sprints, they're Max the Dominion. I would like to see that going, or an Oscar win. He also has a sprint. Did Lando win a sprint last year? I think he won one.
I think he won one.
Yeah.
I think either Max or Oscar have a really good chance of winning.
Yeah.
I think Ferrari might have a good chance. They were pretty good on the circuit last season.
Yeah.
And I also think the Mercedes are going to be up there for sure.
Yeah. I hope. I would like Lewis to win the sprint because he hasn't won one. It was Valtteri who won one back in 2021. So it's kind of crazy that Lewis has won those sprints. So I'd like to see that. I just like to see Ferrari be better. And as for the race, honestly, if it rains, nothing what we say here matters. I imagine that McLaren will probably do a lockout on front row lockout on qualifying again, and then for the race, anything could happen.
Yeah,
Lewis is very loved in China, so I hope he has a better result.
Oh yeah,
we'll see.
I think Lando and Max are still going to end up on the podium,
for sure.
Unless something happens, like one of their cars blows up.
Yeah.
Or they crash
I want to
out.
see some engine failures. I would like to see that. Because I don't want to say I want to see some crashes. I don't.
No.
But engine failures are always good.
They're always interesting.
Yeah.
Always unexpected. Kind of like last Australian GP when Max's.
Yeah, that was unexpected. Nobody could believe that. And then Lewis
fire.
also went out. Yeah, that was crazy. I was watching a race from 2001 the other day. Like 10 cars had an engine failure. You know, those were the good days.
Those were the good
We need to see more of this. They're too prepared now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to say sprint winner, Oscar Piastri.
Mm-hmm.
Race winner, Max or Lewis. Either one. It's more hopeful than anything. I need to see the practices to say more, but I'm going to say that.
Yeah, I think for the sprint race, I'm also going to go with Oscar just because Oscar is my GOAT. And I think he's really good at sprint races as well. And I think he's in McLaren, so pretty sure secured. But for the race, I think Lando or George could take
George, you know, George is always there to pick stuff up.
He's always there.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, kind of like in this race. I don't know how he got podium. I think I kind of forgot that he was racing.
He was just floating around. He made no mistakes.
Right. He kind of just cruised by.
Yeah, it's not the first time it happens that he gets a podium because some unfortunate thing happens to other people. But, you know, he made no mistakes and he deserved that podium.
Oh, for sure.
And now Mercedes is leading the constructors.
Once again?
Yeah, and Ferrari's P7. So we'll see if that changes next week.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. I'm Mars.
And I'm Hannah.
And this was Roadrunner Racing.